in influence exists in both sectors. The impact both damage society by eroding trust, hindering fair competition. The difference, the perpetrators, target, ripple effect, and accountability. Public sector's corruption involves government, while private sector involves personnel. The target, public sector targets public resources and institutions, while private sector focuses on can see here. The ripple effect is, let me increase the font here. The ripple effect is the private sector involves company personnel, while public sector targets public resources and institutions, while private sector focuses on business competition. The ripple effect is public sector competition often has wider social impact, while private sector effects are more concentrated in the business field or business world. Accountability, public officials face higher scrutiny and potentially wider enforcement, while private sector might be less visible but face legal repercussion if exposed. Bribery, beyond bribery. Bribery, the effect of receiving an inducement to influence a decision is well-known form of corruption. It involves embezzlement, nepotism, patronage, trading in influence, conflict of interest, and fraud, as well as extortion. I think this is self-explanatory. The intertwined web. Public and private corruption can be interconnected. Business might bribe public officials, and corrupt public officials might seek kickbacks, creating a cycle that undermines good governance and economic development. Conclusion. Combating corruption requires a two-pronged approach. One is the public sector, and the second is the private sector. The public sector is strengthening legal frameworks, increasing transparency, and holding officials to accountable is very important. While in the private sector, promote ethical business practices, improve transparency in corporate governance, and enforce regulation against corruption is very prudent. By understanding the different forms of impacts of corruption in each sector, we can design a better policies and foster a culture of integrity in both public and private sectors. The key United Nations Convention tackling corruption are two. One is the United Nations Convention against Corruption. The other one is United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crimes. On the UNCAC, focuses specifically on preventing and combating corruption and promotes integrity, accountability, and transparency in governance. Requires a state to criminalize various corrupt practices and establish legal framework to address them. On United Nations Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, has a broader focus on transnational organized crime, but recognize the link with corruption and aims to promote cooperation in preventing, combating organized crime, including corruption. Requires the state to criminalize specific corruption offenses related to organized crime. Emphasize the importance of strong law enforcement and international cooperation. Key differences. Depending on how you read the the acronym is individual discretion. You can call it UNCAC or UNCAC. The UNCAC is a comprehensive anti-corruption treaty, while United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime focuses on organized crime with a corruption element. UNCAC covers a wider range of corrupt practices, while United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime targets specific aspects. Importance of both. UNCAC provides a strong legal framework. UNTOC highlights the international dimension of corruption. Together, they offer a comprehensive approach to fighting corruption. The limitation of these institutions. Effectiveness relies on a strong national enforcement and political will. Asset recovery can be challenging due to bureaucracy and lack of cooperation. Hello?
Yes, we are listening.
Kenya's fight against corruption, legal framework, achievement, and challenges. The legal framework has established a legal framework to combat corruption with key laws like EACC Act, Bribery Act, and Public Procurement Act. The Constitution guarantees the right to clean environment potentially impacted by corrupt resources management. The achievement. Public awareness of corruption has increased due to EACC's initiatives. High-profile prosecutions under the new laws send a message of deterrence. The improved legal framework demonstrates Kenyans' commitment to tackling corruption, and the challenges is weak enforcement with low prosecution rate, raises concern about fairness and political influence. Recovering and storing assets through complex international transfers remain difficult. Protection mechanism need strengthening to encourage reporting, as well as public participation need to be increased to hold authorities accountable and promote integrity. Moving forward, strengthening anti-corruption agencies like EACC is critical or crucial for their independence and effectiveness. Fast-tracking corruption cases through the judicial system can deter potential offenders. Promoting transparency in government processes and political financing reduces opportunity for corruption. Empowering citizens with knowledge and safe reporting mechanism are essential steps. Conclusion, while Kenya has the legal framework overcoming weak enforcement, strengthening institutions, and fostering a culture of transparency and accountability are crucial for lasting progress. Public participation, whistleblowers protection are key to effective tackling corruption and building a more just society. We are looking into now the regional anti-corruption legal framework initiatives and their role in supplementing and complementing global efforts. Anti-corruption network for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The anti-corruption network for Eastern Europe and Central Asia is a regional anti-corruption program which covers countries of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. The ACN brings national governments from more than 20 countries in the region together with OECD government, as well as civil society and business representatives. Anti-corruption efforts by the European Union. Europe is thought to be one of the most successful regions in fighting corruption. However, it has not been spared from the fight yet. According to their website, Europe loses approximately 6% of her GDP to corruption every year. In May 2023, Commission adopted by the anti-corruption package. This package provides directives for combating corruption and also seeks to harmonize definition and penalties for various forms of corruption among member states. The EU network against corruption brings together various actors across the region And the actors include law enforcement, public authorities, practitioners, civil society, among other stakeholders. Anti-corruption by efforts by the African Union. Africa is estimated to lose more than US dollars 50 billion annually through illicit financial outflows. This is a big blow to Africa effort to lift herself and her people out of abject poverty that has plagued the continent for ages. The African Union adopted the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption in 2003. So far, 48 out of 55 members have adopted the convention. The African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption was created under Section 22. Subsection 1 of the convention is mandated by the EU to fight corruption in Africa. The board is supposed to analyze the extent of corruption in Africa, including corruption by multinationals, and advise African government on how to combat corruption. Anti-corruption effort by the East African Commission, EAC, in November 2023, the East African Legislative Assembly, ELA, which is the legislative body of the East Africa Community, enacted the East African Community Integrated Anti-Corruption Bill, as stated by the ELA website. The purpose of this bill was to promote integrity and ethical values within the organs and institutions of the community, strengthen legal framework, and combating corruption in the community, provide for cooperation by the national anti-corruption agencies in preventing and combating corruption and related matters. The role of civil society organization, the CSOs, in exposing and combating corruption. Research on corruption awareness, creation, and campaign against corruption. One of the ways that civil societies help in fight against corruption is through civic education. They educate members, the public, about prevalence of and impact of corruption and help in preventing the same. Transparency International Kenya is one such organization that carries regular research on corruption in various institutions in Kenya. During the COVID period, 2020-2021, the Transparency International came up with the COVID-19 tracker, whereby they will monitor the money allocated to fight against COVID and how it's spent. They put their leaders to account through Mwananchi, updated on whether resources were being put to the right use or they were being diverted to other use through corruption. Policy formulation. Civil society play a key role in formulating laws and policies that aid in the war against corruption. The Constitution of Kenya 2010 came as a result of agitation by CEOs over many years. Chapter 6 of the Constitution that established the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission came as a result of such by the CSOs. An attempt to defeat corruption and establish ethical Kenyan society. The Commission has played a big role in the war against corruption. Mzalendo Institute is a Kenyan CSO whose mission is to promote the realization of open, inclusive, and accountable parliaments across Kenya and East Africa. Advocacy and mobilization. The CSOs are known for mobilizing citizens to demand transparency and accountability in the management of public resources. They call out members of the public to say no to corruption. Through mass protests, demand resignation of corrupt government officials, and lead the removal of government and removal officers from office, and even jailing of corrupt public officials. The Rose Revolution that took place in Georgia in 2003 is a good example. Civil society organizations took leadership of the movement and forced President who had come to office through a rigged election to resign barely 20 days after assuming office. Members of the public may be angry against corruption, but in many cases, it has taken civil society to organize successful protests. Role of whistleblower protection in exposing and combating corruption. 2015 studies from Australia showed that whistleblowing protection is the single most important way in which wrongdoing was brought to light in public sector organizations. There is a need to protect who raise the alarm. Sometimes whistleblowers face discrimination, and sometimes they lose their jobs. Such case study is of Mr. Sankale Spencer, accountant of Masai Mara University, who was dismissed after exposing a scandal that saw the vice chancellor and the other university official charged for misappropriation of funds, and Sankale was dismissed soon after exposing the scandal. As a signatory of the United Nations Convention on Anti-Corruption and the African Union Convention for Preventing and Combating Corruption, Kenya has committed to put measures in place to protect whistleblowers. The Whistleblowers Bill of 2023 is one such measure, and the bill requires both private and public bodies to have measures or policies to protect whistleblowers from harassment, dismissal. Community-based initiative and public awareness campaign in fostering transparency and integrity. The role and effectiveness of community-based anti-corruption efforts. Community-based anti-corruption initiatives are critical for circumventing corrupt state actors. They empower those most adversely affected by corruption and building trust and integrity at the local level. The effectiveness of these efforts can vary significantly based on the value of the resources at stake. This initiative often fails when local resources are minimal interest to national actors. Community-based initiatives tend to be more successful. Conversely, these initiatives often fail when resources are highly valued for strategic or economic reasons due to institutional capture, which manipulates institutions to serve the interests of powerful groups or individuals, stripping level actors of their influence and control. Community policing and youth engagement in anti-corruption efforts. The Kenyan government Community Policing Initiative, launched in 2002, exemplifies the application of community-based approaches to enhance security and reduce crime. This initiative aims to foster cooperation between the police and local communities, thereby improving social order and trust in a law enforcement. The MCT, Department of Public Policy and Administration, that's where we got that, that we refer to that. Studies in areas like Nakuru's North Sub-County indicate that awareness and active participation among local residents are critical to the initiative's success. Factors influencing the uptake and sustainability of this initiative include the relevance of strategies employed and the level of community engagement and the support from policing agents. Youth engagement in an anti-corruption effort is also crucial. Case studies of community action against corruption. In Garissa, Kenya, community action played a vital role in addressing perceived injustice related to corruption. In November 2022, the community, particularly the youth, protested and the unlawful dismissal of over 2,000 county staff members. Their sustained effort, including taking the matter to court, resulted in a conservatory order halting the staff audit task force initiated by the county government. This case underscores the potential community mobilization to challenge corrupt practices and secure legal redress. Similarly, in Kisii community effort led to the impeachment of Deputy Governor 2024. The local community active involvement and the subsequent legislative process at the Senate highlight the significant impact of grassroots participation in holding public officials accountable. International initiatives, the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. The OECD Anti-Bribery Convention, effective since 1999, represents a significant international effort to curb bribery and promote corporate integrity. The convention criminalizes the bribery of foreign public officials in international business transactions. And enforce relevant laws within their jurisdiction. The convention provision requires parties to impose effective, proportionate, and dissuasive sanctions, establish jurisdiction over the offenses, and facilitate mutual legal assistance and extradition. The impact of OECD Anti-Bribery Convention on corporate behavior has been profound. It has led to increased prosecution and fines for companies and executives involved in the act. Major forms of corruption in Kenya. One is bribery. Bribery is perhaps the most common forms of corruption in Kenya. Involves offering money or favors to public officials. It can occur at different levels, from petty bribes to high-level corruption. Each year, the Kenya Bribery Index reveals that Kenyans frequently encounter corruption in their interaction with national and local government institutions. Forms of bribery in Kenya. Police bribes. Citizens often bribe police officers to avoid fines, secure permits, and evade legal consequences. There is also customs and immigration bribes at the border point, airports, and immigration officers. Healthcare bribes. Patients may offer bribes to healthcare officer for better treatment. Education bribes. Parents sometimes pay teachers or school administration to secure admission for better grades. Business and licensing. Entrepreneurs encounter bribery when obtaining license, permits, and contracts. Land transaction. Bribe to facilitate land allocation, titling, and transfers. Judicial system bribes can influence court decision, case outcomes. Embezzlement. Embezzlement refers to misappropriation of theft. I think we have also came across this earlier. Of public funds and individuals entrusted with managing these funds. In Kenya, this form of corruption has significant implications for public finances, service delivery, and overall development. Embezzlement occurs when public officials or employees divert funds allocated for specific purposes, such as development project or public service or infrastructure for their personal gain. Common scenarios of embezzlement in Kenya. Public procurement normally occurs during procurement process. Government agencies, whereby they embezzle funds by creating ghost workers, inflating salaries, and misusing budget allocation. Local authorities, at the county government, municipal bodies susceptible to embezzlement, affecting service delivery and development initiatives. Kickbacks is an illicit payment or commissions made to public officials, private individuals, or companies in exchange for favorable treatment, contract, business opportunities, and many more. Forms of kickbacks in Kenya. Government contracts. Companies seeking government contracts may offer kickbacks to officials responsible for awarding tenders. Procurement. It's a pay kickbacks. Suppliers pay kickbacks to procurement officers for favorable outcomes, like contractors may provide kickbacks to engineers or project managers overseeing construction of project. Business licenses, entrepreneurs seeking license or permit may pay kickbacks to officials for expedited approvals. Land transactions, kickbacks can influence land allocation, titling, and transfers. Some notable Kenyan corruption cases. One is the Golden Bug scandal of 1990s. One of the Kenya's largest corruption scandal involving the Kenyan government and a company called the Golden Bug International. The company was accused of receiving large payments for exporting non-existent gold and diamonds. It may have costed the Kenyan government more than, or Kenyan people more than $1 billion. The Anglo-Leasing scandal of 2000, series of procurement scams involving multiple contracts for security and communication systems. The contracts were awarded to non-existing companies for services that were either overpriced or not delivered. And it has costed the Kenyan people approximately $600 million. The National Youth Service scandal of 2015-2018, massive corruption cases involving National Youth Service. In 2015, about 790 million was stolen through fictitious invoices and overpayment for goods and services that were not provided or basically provided in a fictitious manner. The 2018 scandal saw another 9 billion allegedly misappropriated through fraudulent tenders and payments. Chicken Gate scandal of 2009-2014, primary case involving the Independent Electoral and Boundary Commission, where officials were accused of receiving bribes, referred to as the chicken in the coded language from UK-based company Smith & Usman in exchange for printing contracts for election materials. Domestic legislation addressing corruption. The Constitution of Kenya, 2010, it addresses corruption through various provisions aimed at promoting transparency, accountability, and integrity in public service. Here is an in-depth explanation of the Constitution on matters corruption. Leadership and Integrity, Chapter 6, on Article 73, 74, 75. 73, Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC. The Constitution establishes the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to oversee enforcement of the principle of leadership. You can refer to Article 79 and Article 80. The Public Service, Chapter 13. The Constitution lays down principles for public service to ensure efficiency and transparency, well enshrined in Article 232. Representation of the people, Chapter 7, provision in the chapter aim to ensure the elections are free from corruption and malpractices, enshrined in Article 88. Public finance, Chapter 12. The Constitution sets out principles of public finance management to promote primary transparency and accountability, the use of public resources, well articulated in Article 201 and 226. Representation of the people, Auditor General, Article 229. The Judiciary, which is Chapter 10, on Article 159, and Commission in the Ombudsman, Article 59, sub-Article 4. That's okay. Accountability mechanism, The Constitution provides several mechanisms to hold public officials accountable and ensure transparency. Through public participation, where it mandates public participation in governance, which help to promote transparency and hold leaders accountable, as well as access to information, which is well articulated in Article 35 that guarantees the right of access to information led by the state, which is essential for transparency and accountability. Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act 2003. It is a comprehensive piece of legislation in Kenya designed to combat corruption and economic crimes. The establishment and functions of the Anti-Corruption Commission. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, initially established in Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, KSC, was later replaced by the EACC. And the powers of EACC.
Hold on, just hold
Yes.
on, let me interrupt here. Because I've been waiting before we delve into the Kenyan scenario, I've been waiting to hear a discussion clearly elucidating the differences between the different crimes that are considered to be corrupt practices. Some were mentioned at the beginning, but it was done very quickly and in passing. For example, bribery. What is the definition of bribery according to the International Convention? How has it been modified in certain jurisdictions at the domestic level? This crime of embezzlement, how do we prove it? The crime of extortion, right? We have fraud, nepotism, trading in influence. What are the mens rea and actus reus elements of these offenses? And is there any difference with how some of these offenses are stated in international conventions compared to domestic conventions?
Let me give to the team to respond to
because
that.
Remember, at the end of the day, it's a law class. So we need to go back to the law. Yes, for the group members. You are the group who had the most time to work on your presentation. So definitely, we will hold you to a very high standard of expectation. For example, now we are talking about the EACC. Now, the EACC would want more details. How did we even first get to the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission? What led to the change and the development to the EACC? Before you even tell us the power, what was the history around the development of those two bodies?
It's explained in this slide.
No, that is not enough. You just say it was replaced, but there were other intrigues behind the scenes. There were other happenings for sure, key things, key elements that actually led to the creation of EACC. And what was it before we even moved to KESCC? What was it initially? What was there before?
I think it was anti-corruption commission led by Harun Wow.
You people should have done the research. We want you people to tell us. The group. This is a very interesting topic. There's so much material to generate discussion points on. Just even the aspect that I've said, those various crimes, right? And what are the other unique crimes that offenses that states have created in a bid to deal with the offense of corruption? What are some of the unique offenses that they have come up with? Yes, the group members, because it appears, I'm even wondering, I'm listening to you talk, you're the only person in the group talking. The group, as you said,
they are there, Mwalimu.
Wako wapi? You cannot be the only one talking. Where are the others?
Waongee, wapi wakina Ali Bashir, Suhail.
Most other groups, the presentation,
Karaoke.
everyone has chipped in. Everyone has had something to do. We have not just listened to one group member.
This was a compilation of a group work where we divided the work into different parts and we compiled as a group. So everyone took part, but I don't know where they're available.
True, but from practice, your group was saying that people were dividing even the presentation. They may have divided the preparation. That's not a problem. But even the preparation, there was again division of labor. Group members. Okay, group members, I will give you an assignment, all of you. You are going to give us answers on these two questions. Anyway, first finish the presentation, then I will give the question.
Okay. Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The Act initially established the Kenyan Anti-Corruption Commission, KACC, which was later replaced by the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission through subsequent legislation. The ACC is tasked with investigating corruption and economic crimes, educating the public on the dangers of corruption and developing persuasive measures against corruption. The powers of EACC has authority to investigate corruption allegations and individuals suspected of corruption and initiate legal proceedings. It has the power to conduct lifestyle audit and scrutinize public officers' declaration of income, assets, and liabilities. Definition and scope. Corruption and economic crimes. The Act provides clear definition of what constitutes corruption and economic crimes. This includes like bribery, fraud, embezzlement, abuse of office, breach of trust, and public finance mismanagement. Corruption of SARS. The ECACA outlines specific offenses related to corruption and economic crimes, along with corresponding penalties. Fraudulent acquisition of public property is established in Section 45. Acquiring of public property or service through deceitful means, including embezzlement, misappropriation, and public funds or resources. Abuse of office, Section 46, where the public officers who use their position to improperly confer a benefit to themselves or others, or to improperly cause harm or detriment to others. Failure to comply with procurement laws, Section 47, and conflict of interest, Section 42. Investigation and prosecution. The ECC has broad powers to investigate suspected corrupt individuals, including summoning witnesses and requiring the production of documents and conducting searches and seizures. Prosecution under Section 32, the Act provides for prosecution of corruption and economic crimes by directors of public prosecution based on investigation conducted by the ECC. Asset recovery and forfeiture. Recovery of illicit assets, Section 51 to 55, allows for seizure and forfeiture of property obtained through corrupt means, provide mechanism for recovery of assets unlawfully acquired. Unexplained wealth orders, Section 55, the ECC can seek court orders requiring individuals to explain of their wealth if it is disappropriate to their non-legitimate income. Failure to satisfactorily explain the wealth may lead to its forfeiture. The Bribery Act, that is Bribery Act 2016, is a Kenyan law that fights bribery in both public and private sectors, defines what bribery is, and gives, that means it defines what bribery is, makes it illegal to give or receive it, and requires business to have a plan to prevent bribery. The other one is, other notable legislation include Public Procurement and Disposal Act 2015, regulates public procurement and processes to prevent corruption. Leadership and Integrity Act 2012 sets standard for public officers' conduct. Proceeds of Crime Anti-Money Laundering Act 2009 of the POCA MLA. Proceeds of Crime Anti-Money Laundering Act, that is, aims to prevent money laundering and competition. Public Finance Management Act 2012. Access to Information Act 2016 enhances transparency by granting access to information. Kenya has also ratified international convention, including the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Conclusion. Corruption extends beyond the act of bribery to encompasses a myriad of unethical practices such as embezzlement, nepotism, extortion, and these acts undermine the integrity of both public and private sectors. International convention like the UNCAC and COCO play a private role in setting global standard for anti-corruption measures. Civil society organizations and whistleblowers protection are critical or crucial in detecting and reporting corruption. They serve as watchdog and provide safe channels for individuals to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. Community-based initiative and public awareness campaign and promoting culture of integrity and transparency. The OECD Anti-Bribery Convention has significantly influenced corporate behavior by imposing stringent measures against bribery of foreign officials, leading to sanctions and increased investigation. In Kenya, major forms of corruption include bribery, cronyism, election fraud, and the country has responded by enacting various legislation, such as the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act, the Public Officers Ethics Act, the Bribery Act, which collectively aim to curb corruption and foster a culture of ethical conduct within society. The multifaceted approach containing international conventions, regional and frameworks, civil society engagement, community initiative, and domestic legislature provide comprehensive strategy to combat corruption and promote just and equitable society.
Okay. We have listened to you people, and I have questions. I will ask my questions, and the rest of the class can also add its questions to this. So,
Kindly, Daktari, can you give us like 5 minutes to pray? Kindly.
actually, let me state the questions because you will go to pray and also it is part of the break for you people to come back with answers for us. Anyway, first go for your prayers.
Okay. One. We are back, Mwalimu.
All right. Are we all back? So have for the group is this. For the different offenses that you have talked about, what are the mens rea and the actus reus elements for the offense of bribery, embezzlement, extortion, fraud, nepotism, trading in influence? What are the mens rea and actus reus elements of those offenses? Then, again, the offenses under ASECA, Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes. You have stated them, but I want now for the group to tell us what are the mens rea and the actus reus elements of those offenses in that act. Okay. Then in relation to, yes, since we already had the ASECA, Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, why the Bribery Act? How do those two differ? Okay. How does the offense...
Kindly repeat that one. Kindly repeat.
What, since we had the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act, why did we have to enact the Bribery Act? What is the difference? What is the difference between the Bribery Act and ASECA? So we will give you, the group, some 10 minutes. You can leave the class first to get into it. Actually, the other way to go about it is, let me see if I can create a group for you. Right. Okay. What I'm going to do, those who are in this group, you're going to choose. There's only one breakout room, and only those who are members of this group that was presenting, click so that you can join that breakout room. Then when you're done, you can come back. So I'm creating it now. So when you see the prompt, only those who are in group 11, click on it to join the breakout room so that you can have a conversation. I'm not seeing anyone joining.
Mwalimu, I can't see the prompt.
Okay. Just a moment. Oh, the room is actually already created. You should have been able to see yourself. Okay. Let me call out names. Just say your name, then I'll take you to the group. Members of group 11, just say your name, then I'll add you to the group manually.
Mohammed Amin.
Okay, Mohammed Amin.
JN Karaoke.
I can JN Karaoke. Who else? Where are the other group members? Those are the only two people.
There is Mohammed Antar Amin. Mohammed Antar.
Already added. Any other name that I need to add that is in class?
Suhail Ahmed.
I'm not seeing any name like that. When I check on the list I have,
Ahmed
I'm
Said.
seeing
He's called Ahmed Said. Suhail Ahmed Said. Mubarak.
Okay, just wait. Suhail Ahmed, okay. Who else?
Bashir.
I can read, see, sorry, Bashir. No, I cannot see any Bashir here. Okay, so you should already be in the room now. Right. Any question from the rest of the class? Yes, Chelsea.
Thank you very much, Dr. Good evening.
Evening to you too.
I have a question that relates to a documentary that was released about 12 days ago. And my question revolves around, laws or international human rights instruments that, specifically protects investigative reporters who uncover, some of the deepest secrets of certain states, for example, corruption. And
Yes.
question stems from the fact that there was a new documentary that was posted by Frontline. And this documentary, for some very strange reason, it's no longer available on the internet. And this is despite, the investigative reporter on the ground and his team having uncovered far-reaching corruption schemes that allegedly lined the pockets of, the Maduro government officials and their allies. And in a way, the United States was also in that mix-up. So my question from all that, is there a specific law or international human rights instrument that specifically protects, investigative reporters, even as they go about their day in uncovering some of these secrets?
Sadly, there is no international law. They just have the standards by which journalists operate. You remember, like there's the consortium of investigative journalists, the ones who are involved in releasing the Panama Papers.
Yes.
There is no, it's just the normal human rights law that would protect them, that we have a right to information, so they should not be curtailed from releasing that information. That's a very interesting thing, but don't you see from the parties you've named who are involved, the sentiment that I raised at the beginning of this class as to why some authors have said we still don't have a definition, it involves the power play. Why would this documentary just disappear? Why? It means, for one, that most international news agencies have been told not to put it up or have a connection to it. Because, I mean, with the internet, something to just disappear. I'm even amazed that you say it. I have not. Shockingly, there was even no link to it on the BBC. So it's interesting. And I normally read news every day. So it's interesting that I did not come across that. If you want also to see the power play that comes in, look at the Assange case. What's his first name? This man who released military secrets. And as of last week, there was a development in his case where he finally got the Court of Appeal in the UK said he has a right of appeal, that he should proceed to appeal. Okay? That tells you, when you look at the power play that has been going on in the Assange case, yes, Julian Assange, you realize the powers that be. He wronged the wrong government, right? And sadly, that is how powerful corruption can be. There has also been arguments out there that say corruption is good if it brings benefit, right? If we use our opportunity to be corrupt for the benefit of others or for the benefit of the larger community, then should we still consider that a crime? Or should we let it be? I myself don't have answers to these questions, because they're an ongoing debate. Because yes, a particular region, for example, may benefit, but what about everyone else? Okay. In this whole saga of corruption comes the case of, for example, foreign companies coming to other jurisdictions, like mostly in the least developed countries, where they offer bribes for purposes of securing contracts. And initially, actually, before that aspect was outlawed, it actually used to be considered as a cost of doing business. It was expected to be factored. Okay? But now it has been outlawed that it is wrong. Is it to say it doesn't happen? I don't think so. It still happens under the guise of different terms. Let me give you another example of a conundrum of whether it is good or bad. Most of you know that when you go to the field, and I'm sure maybe for the agencies you've worked for, you've encountered this. If you want to go to collect data, say from a particular area, right? Most of the time, collecting data it's a voluntary activity and it's for free. Meaning, even those who are coming to give the data that you're collecting should be doing so not expecting anything in return. It is simply, they have the information you need, and probably from your research, the findings may eventually be of benefit to them in terms of maybe implementation of changes. But there is now the perception, especially in Africa, that there should be payment of this so-called facilitation fee. That when people attend your data collection exercise, there is the query of equapi lunch, or it could also be termed as transport. Why? Why should we? And there are those who justify and say, look, this person has left their work for the day. They could have been farming or anything. They stopped their farming to come and give. So you should compensate that. But the question is, has it become a right also that it must be given? Failure to that, there is a problem. So these are some of, honestly, the challenges, right? And especially that element that we spoke about culture and how ingrained some of this, what is considered, defining what is considered corruption or not. Especially when you follow, like in West African countries, some things really are not considered corruption according to their culture, right? Forget about the behaviors they have developed, but it's over time that you gift somebody for doing something, whether a public officer or not, that is not considered bad. It's the norm, it's expected. Yet our international law is now saying that which we are now expected to domesticate, that is wrong. that should not happen. So who should we follow? Okay. Then there is the argument that is also raised that, look, the West developed while corruption was still there, very rampant. Okay. Very, very rampant. Yet they're now stopping the same from happening in Africa. Why? Yet they engaged in the same behaviors. Actually, if you read like the history of England, is where you see some of these things that are happening here were happening there a long time ago. Did you know, for example, in England, you people are complaining about taxes now. There was a tax, a window tax. So people actually barricaded. There was a king, I can't remember who was so desperate for money that he started taxing people based on the number of windows you had in your building. So people started filling in their windows. What was the name of the tax? It had a funny name. So the less windows you had, the less tax you paid. I mean, just think about the absurdity of it all. I'm charging you a tax based on the number of windows you have in your home. Yes, Ibrahim.
Daktari, I think there is a disconnect between how the ordinary or Wanjiku or ordinary Kenyans perceive corruption and how corruption is defined in our statutory laws. Now we talk of like chicken, facilitation, kitu kidogo, all this. We don't find this definition in our laws. And you see, even during the electioneering period, hand out like 100 bob are given out by the candidates, but people don't perceive this as corruption. It's just, to them, it's normal. You know, this is like, okay, nikitu kidogo, I'm taking it. So like everybody is partaking this thing. So I think the way we define corruption in our laws and the way our, you know, our intuition works and how we feel like this is corrupt, there is a disconnect in this, in the sense that now maybe we need to revisit our laws and define corruption on how our people understand, so that they know this thing is corruption. Because if you don't have facilitation as a corruption in our laws, if you don't have anything called chicken or something like that, so that when Jikus knows that this thing is corrupt. Because now if I go to place and then then I just give, I don't still believe that this is corruption, you know. So I think like there's a disconnect in the definition and how maybe we are defining corruption based on how Western people perceive corruption, which is different from how the African our people actually perceive corruption. So I think there could be a problem in this, because my reading of also corruption, I think the seed of corruption is sowed by the colonialists, and they left, and then the subsequent government just continued because it was benefiting them, it was benefiting their people, and up to now it is continuing. So I don't know why the Westerns, they sowed this seed in our people, in our soil, but theirs, maybe it is there, but in other names. And the way we are defining is according to their language, not our language, Malim. So there is a language problem in this case. That's what might think so, this case.
True. There are others who have said that it's, you know, an understanding of different cultures, hence the distinction. But some of the acts are so, if, as I said, an officer, a public officer helps you and you give them a mandazi, vis-a-vis somebody who comes and gives the same officer 100,000, who is on the wrong between the two? Who is corrupt and who is not?
I think, Daktari, in this case, the mandazi and the 100, more or less, they're all corruption. So then if it's a corruption, it's corruption, whether it is big or small. Only that one is in a bigger magnitude, higher magnitude, and one is smaller magnitude, but they're all corruption. But the language is different in this case.
But you see, that's the challenge. You're bringing out the issue that I was trying to highlight. That aspect of, you know, the gray spectrum. What exactly is good? What exactly is bad? And then also the aspect of the morphing of these corrupt behaviors, so that something will very easily be couched as something good before you actually realize that indeed it is corruption. You see, like the example I've given of these contracts, it used to be couched as facilitation fee. Yet it was simply just being corrupt, paying people money so that they award you contracts or tenders. So as you're saying, yes, there is the difference in cultural understandings, but why can we not? If in other areas we have been able to find a commonality, why some of this, right? And tie it in with what the discussion we were having in relation to, for example, terrorism. Again, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So again, there we cannot agree, right? So this is something that and that will go on for many years to come. And the greater challenge is finding ways to deal with it. Because you find people even find a way of catering for corruption. Yeah. Another example would be a donation made because the donor supports the party and wishes to increase its chances of being elected. But in hindsight, the person is secretly hoping to receive favors from them. Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, for example, like in the US, the laws on elections are very clear in terms of election funding and the level of scrutiny and openness that is expected to try and address some of these issues. Yes, and thank you, Janet, and it was the window tax. Janet and Chelsea, it was the window tax. I can even see somebody has written, and I haven't seen this article, lessons from England's window tax. Yes, people just, barricaded their windows and ensured there was no light coming into their homes so that they could not get taxed. Anyway, let's come back to the questions that I asked the group before they come back. Why? We had a SECA. Why did we need to enact the Bribery Act? Simply put, what is the distinction between a SECA and the Bribery Act?
ASECA deals with a whole lot of economic crimes and corruption, but bribery is domain specific to the crime of bribery.
Okay.
Dr. Can I attempt?
Yes.
I'm not sure whether I'm wrong, but let me just attempt. I think there was parliamentary commission, is it? They were trying to investigate why the corruption is still rampant. And then there was some legislative reforms that were coming out from their research. I don't know whether that was what actually now triggered the enactment of the Bribery Act. Maybe that's just my suggestion. I'm not sure, man.
Actually, the answer lies more in what was said earlier, the scope. And for your information, our Bribery Act, as we normally do with enough of our statutes, we copied. It is almost identical to the UK Bribery Act. That's where we got it from. The key distinction between the two is scope. ASECA has a broader scope, right? It tackles a wider range of, should we say, similar, right? It deals with corruption and other economic crimes. So ASECA also deals with offenses like embezzlement, abuse of office, and economic sabotage, right? Its main focus of application is the public sector. Nevertheless, not to say that it's completely focused on the public sector, but it can apply to the private sector in certain circumstances. But its primary focus is on corruption involving public officials and public institutions, okay? Whereas the Bribery Act of 2016 targets specifically the issue of bribery alone. So it's not, the scope, as you can see now, is narrower. It focuses only on the offense of bribery. And again, the focus now in this case expands because it targets bribery by both the public and the private sectors. Another unique aspect of the Bribery Act is that it targets the crime of bribery in two ways: the offering and the accepting. So it's not just, bribery is no longer, the offense is not just about receiving, giving the bribe. It is also an offense in relation to receiving, yeah? And another key element that the Bribery Act brought in is corporate liability, that a corporate entity can be held liable for bribery offenses, even if these offenses are committed by their employees or agent. And the reasoning or the rationale for this is simple, and it makes sense. A company does not think for itself. A company does not have a human brain or human capability to think for itself. It is the management and the employees, right, who are the agents of the company, who think on its behalf. So if they engage in acts on behalf of the company, then indeed, even the corporate entity can be charged. So that was a unique element also brought in by the Bribery Act, that a corporate entity can be held liable for that particular offense. And which therefore means if a case is instituted, then the consequences are more severe, because you not only can hold the company accountable, but the company's agents by way of employees or even the board of directors where need be, right? So these two acts are complementary to each other. You can say the Bribery Act narrows down the scope, right? Makes it a little bit more easier and specific in terms of dealing with bribery in ways that a SECA does not do, okay? Let me ask another question. Have the group members come back?
Yes, Mwalimu, but you're already answering our questions.
I'm answering. Good. Okay, you are back. So what are the answers to the other question?
Mwalimu, I
Yes.
was armed with the answer for the difference between the two acts. Yeah, but the question of menswear, I will kindly request my colleagues to assist.
Okay.
And I apologize. We should have done a better job.
I have endeleeni sasa. Yes. Let us start with the question of what are the offenses under a SECA? Yes. Umeenda kudiscuss. Do even all The offenses that I read to you, are they all actually offenses? Is there an offense known as nepotism? Now, in relation to corruption, for the offense of fraud, the guilty mind element that is required is the knowledge of a falsehood, and that the purpose of that falsehood is with the intent to deceive, right? And gain something of value, okay? Either to gain something or cause loss to another person. So it may not be you gaining directly, but you know that the falsehood that you are creating with the intention to deceive will cause a loss on another entity or person, right? That is the mental element that is required. Then the guilty act is making that false representation. That false representation that you make, that is the act itself, right? You give false information knowing that somebody will rely on the misrepresentation. So that misrepresentation is the false act. Then when we come to extortion, the mental element for extortion is the intention to obtain money. And actually, I should not use the term money, I should use the term property. For most offenses nowadays, we don't talk of money. We talk of property because property is a much broader term. So it will be able to encompass very many scenarios. So the mens rea element for extortion is the intention to obtain property through threats or intimidation. So in extortion, there is the element of using threats or intimidation, right? And the physical act is the threat to inflict harm on someone, right? Or something they care about. Because you may not directly threaten to inflict harm on that individual. Maybe you could threaten to inflict harm on their child. And you know that that will elicit a reaction. So the threat to cause harm. I come, I beat you up a bit, or I send you threatening messages. Yes. So I intend to obtain money, I intend to obtain property through threats or intimidation. Then I'm headed in the direction of committing the offense of extortion. Embezzlement requires the intention to permanently deprive the rightful owner their property or funds that are entrusted to their care. And in this case, we said that embezzlement is in the context of the conventions. UNCAC, for example, talks about public funds. According to the Kenyan statute, ASECA, it mainly relates to public funds, because these funds have been entrusted to you for care. You're supposed to take care of these funds, handle them, for their rightful purpose. But by the mental intent that you have, you want to deprive the rightful owner of this property that they have entrusted unto you to take care of. So how are you going to deprive them? You're going to deprive them by committing the actor's use of misappropriating or stealing this property that you're entrusted with. Okay? So when you actually now misappropriate or steal then you have completed the actus reus. For bribery, and we've said the bribery offense can be in two ways. Bribery for the person offering and for the person accepting. So the mens rea for the person offering is that their intention is to influence the recipient's conduct. Their intention is to influence the recipient's conduct. Whereas for the person accepting the bribe, the mental element is the knowledge that they are receiving something so as to influence their conduct improperly. The knowledge that they are receiving something to influence their conduct improperly, right? So then the physical act will be the offering itself, the promising to give, the giving, the accepting, okay? It could even be, by the way, when we talk about things like bribery, it's not just about doing something. It could even, you're bribing somebody not to do that which they're supposed to do. That still will be considered bribery. That you're paying this person so that they do not do that which they are expected to do. Then that too is corruption, okay? Trading in influence, and this is interesting because in some jurisdictions, the offense of trading in influence doesn't exist. So in different jurisdictions, it is an offense that is not there. But it is, like in Europe, it is an acceptable or a known offense. Trading in influence, your mental element is you intend to use your personal connections or influence to improperly obtain a benefit or influence a decision. It requires the intention, that is your mental element, to use your personal connections or influence to improperly obtain a benefit or influence a decision, right? And then the actus reus is that act, whatever it is that you do to lock into place, to use your connections, that will be the actus reus element. Now, you may find that slightly in different jurisdictions, there might be slight variations to these aspects in terms of the elements of these offenses. But generally that we can attribute to the peculiar circumstances of the different jurisdictions, okay? Section 51, liability for compensation. A person who does anything that constitutes corruption or economic crime is liable to anyone who suffers a loss as a result for an amount that would be full compensation for the loss suffered. You know, simply, definitely the compensation cannot be infinite. What most likely is going to happen is that people will be told to lodge their claims, so that the claims you see cannot just be accepted blindly. The claims will have to be vetted. And it is from this vetting, because you must show a connection between this loss and the economic crime committed. So it's not a blanket application. There has to be vetting to see. And once the vetting is done, there must be a time frame. Again, it can't be, it will again go beyond the precepts of justice, even for the accused person. that they consistently have, as we would say, the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads indefinitely, that would be wrong. So there would definitely be time periods imposed. So that would be my interpretation of section 51 of ASECA.
Dr.
Any other question? Yes?
Under that section 51, can we say facilitation will also fall under that section? Because if you give someone a facilitation, for example, promises another person to help him or her in seeking in employment opportunities, and you pay some money there, then you can use that section to recover your money from that person in case you did not.
That may not be possible, because remember, we have to interpret section 51 within the context of ASECA itself. So we must look at what constitutes the offense of corruption or an economic crime under ASECA. And clearly you would see in this case, the person would have to have been convicted of an act of corruption or a specific economic crime under the act. So the loss you suffer will depend. It may, maybe in terms of, yes, the facilitation, what the facilitation fee you paid, or it could be some other loss. Maybe you lost another opportunity that you would have gone for had you not anticipated what this person was promising, right? When you bribed them. So it would have to be looking at it on a case-by-case basis to determine whether indeed loss has been suffered and it is compensation for what. Because not everything will be maybe compensatable, if there is such a term.
Well, maybe,
Yeah.
Malibu, sorry to interject. Good
Mhm.
evening.
Good evening.
Maybe to respond to my colleague who has just spoken. I think when you give money or whatever kind of inducement so that you can secure a job and you don't get the job, I think you're also being guilty here because you're trying to solicit a favor or maybe have the recruiting board decide in a manner that is not proper. So you're also guilty, and I don't think you should be compensated for participating in bribery. That is one. Two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. The question I was asking about section 51. You know, I'm looking at look at, for example, the fertilizer scandal.
Yes.
Would it now be possible in the context of section 51 for any farmer out there who might have relied on this fertilizer and incurred a loss that is verifiable and quantifiable to maybe
Yes.
move forward and get compensated by these particular individuals?
If an individual, say for whom they bought their fertilizer, was found guilty under ASECA, then yes, because you see, to quantify the loss would be generally how much, say, produce would you have made from your farm? On average, what would have been, how much would you have sold the produce for? Therefore, what would you have made? So it's easy to quantify, right? The key thing is also being able to quantify the loss. It's not just about saying I suffered loss. Can we quantify that loss? So in that case, yes. But you see, the key aspect is like in the case you're talking about, the person would have to have been convicted of an offense linked to an economic crime or corruption under the act. And also, and this is where now POCAMLA becomes wider, POCAMLA allows for asset forfeiture. If you have been convicted of an offense under whatever law in the country, so long as it's an offense under the Kenyan law, the asset forfeiture provisions of POCAMLA can be activated. And so this is strictly in this, I'm using this example where what I talked about, criminal forfeiture. You have been convicted of a crime, then we try to see what benefit did you make from that crime, right? So in this case, would be how much bribes did you receive? You see, we would say, for example, we've convicted you of the offense of bribery. Good. Then now we want to get the benefit that you obtained from this bribery. So would be probably to look at how much money were you paid in bribes. That money of you got in bribes, you invested it. What were the fruits that you reaped? And then we can now ask the court to proceed to forfeit, to make an order that you forfeit that money, essentially meaning that you give the money to the state because rightfully doesn't belong to you. That's another way of looking at it. So yes, and I keep saying, interesting, these are some of the laws we have in our country, but we have not implemented them properly, or we rarely implement them. So people don't even know they exist or how to utilize them. Any other question? Now, the interesting thing, when I look at my calendar, exams should be beginning next week, right?
Yes, Dr. Perry.
Now, because of sadly the week that we missed, we still have one more group presentation that is supposed to happen. The very last group on the emerging crimes. Who are the group members of that, in that group 12?
Malim, Dr. I'm one of them, Ibrahim speaking.
Okay. Have you people prepared your presentation?
Not today, Malim. We are not prepared to present today because some groups are not there. I cannot see them. So we were doing some final patch up. So we were expecting there will be probably in the course of the week, a makeup class.
Now, the makeup class, you're the people to tell me, because remember, you people say you have classes throughout the week. So you are the ones to tell me.
Malimu, Friday, we don't have class. I think we are done with, I'm not sure, maybe my side, my group, we are doing refugee and asylum, we are done. So I'm not sure of other groups who are having classes on Friday.
Hello, people, I think you'll still be having a class.
You'll still be having a class. That is as I suspected that this is the time, even anyone who may have missed a class, this is the time they want to catch up. Huh?
Coastal and marine environmental law is still also a class, and it's compulsory for Kisumu.
Okay, all right. What I will do, the people in that group, by Thursday, share the work with me. I will put it up on class. And if anyone has a question, okay, I will enable the comments. I will enable the comments on the class chat. Then anyone with a question, post your question there and I will answer it. Okay. And you do not have, in your presentation, I realized that I had included cyber crimes, yet we have already covered cyber crimes. So you don't need to cover cyber crimes again. Leave it out. We've already comprehensively covered it. So focus on the others. I think that is how we will tackle this.
Limo, can they present today? They are not ready.
No, they've just said they're not ready.
Okay.
And I myself, I was so backed up last week, I forgot to send an email saying that they should be ready today also. But there's well, it's an interesting topic, and there's nothing. I will see. I will see. Let them send the PowerPoint. If there's anything I need to add on it, I will add and put it up on the Google Classroom. For the CAT assignment, you remember what I said last week, so we are not anticipating any CAT. And for the group, the last group that has not presented, the more reason why, put your best effort on your presentation. I mean, sorry, on your PowerPoint. The exam, the timetable will soon be out. I believe they're finalizing on it.
We already have it, Terry.
They've released the final version.
I think what we have is the final, because we were told to check if there are clashes.
No, that's not the final then. The minute you're told to check on clashes, that's not the
Yes.
final. That's the tentative one. That's the one released so as to check whether, as you're saying, as you've been told to check whether there are clashes for anyone, so that it can be amended.
No, but the another amended one was sent to us, and we all confirmed that it was okay.
When was this?
Last
How
week.
come I have not seen anything like that in my inbox? I only saw the first version.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a second version in which one of the units is being sat on a Saturday. Don't know whether you have got.
No, I do not have anything like that.
Yeah, we have that.
Okay. Now I know. Now I know. So you already have seen. I think they've slated this unit. Is it on an afternoon?
Yeah, it's on Tuesday 11th at 2 p.m. from 2 p.m.
2 p.m. Okay. Arika?
Yes, good evening, Mwalimu.
Good evening.
Just a few things. First of all, I was double placed for this for the presentations. I already presented for group 8 for drug trafficking, but I had also been placed in this particular group. So just so that it doesn't cause any confusion, because I had already worked with group 8 substantively, I did not work with this group. So maybe going forward, you can just note that I did not do the double work. Secondly, I have sent the work for group 8. I apologize that it has come late. I was under the assumption that I had sent it, but I had not. And then lastly, I have a question regarding what we have talked about today, this section 51. And I feel like the act is quite broad in the provision, who says like a person who, sorry, where was it? Yes, a person who does anything that constitutes corruption or economic crime is liable to anyone who suffers a loss as a result for an amount that would be full compensation for the loss suffered. I am wondering what is the degree of separation, because sometimes like losses suffered based on these types of crimes can be direct or it can be an indirect type of loss, but even the indirect one can be quantifiable. So I'm wondering
the key answer to that question is the connection, and the connection as a result of the definition of what does as a result of mean. And I know that especially in matters where we are doing forfeiture, because that's similar to an element of forfeiture, that issue is considered. Just a moment, let me open a document where that the use of those words as a result of is very, very specific. It connotes that there must be some link just because I know there's even case law in the UK that has addressed that issue. Yes. As a result of applies to any consequence of committing an offense. Okay. Therefore, a benefit can be acquired or a consequence can arise of having completed the commission of an offense, right? Or it can be gained prior to actual commission of an offense. Yeah. So that is the meaning, as opposed to use of the words in connection with, right? So that is the use of the words as a result of there is very specific, connoting the connection, right? And remember, I have also said that it must be in relation to the offense of either corruption, somebody having been convicted of the offense of corruption, or an economic crime under a SECA. Okay, not under any other statute, but under a SECA, right? And for an amount that would be full compensation for the loss suffered. So one, you see, you're not just going to come and say, I suffered loss. They would investigate. Indeed, did you suffer loss? What was the extent and value of that loss in order to determine what you need to be compensated? So it's not just blanket for you to come. They would actually be investigate or look into it to see whether indeed you suffered a loss, and is that loss actually connected to this act of corruption or this economic crime that has been committed by this individual. There has to be a connection. So it actually can be done. It's possible to achieve this. And what would mean is that, remember, these people can take away your property. They can engage under SECA. They can engage asset forfeiture. So from the asset forfeiture they engage, they will have proceeds, right, to compensate. That is actually what would happen. And remember, there is the compensation fund that is created. It's created under POCAMLA, but it applies to even ASECA. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. But I would be very interested in reading the case law. Perhaps if you can link us to the citations or the cases themselves.
Okay, for 446, just a moment. R versus Waller should be the case. Yep, read this case. R versus Waller, it's a United Kingdom case. Talks about that aspect as a result of. Okay. Then this aspect of in connection with, right? When we talk about in connection with an offense, so read these two cases. The first one that I have posted, the R versus Waller, deals with as a result of. This one, the next one, addresses the issue of in connection with. Those two cases. Solomon? Solomon, your hand is raised.
Yes, I raised my hand because I wanted to get your thoughts on the issue of
Thank you, Daktari.
Corruption cases that have a transnational crime aspect between players in Kenya and other jurisdictions. And from what we read, both in court documents and the media, is that other jurisdictions are able to obtain a conviction for the same facts and the same incidences. For example, we have the Jersey case where players in the Jersey Island were convicted. We have the Chicken Gate case where players in that tender for election materials were convicted and they had to repay back some of the money they got from that transaction, and a couple of others I would mention. But domestically, we are not able to obtain a conviction. And because you're a subject matter expert in this area, obviously, from a layman perspective, we might hazard a guess what is the reason. But I wanted to get your thoughts on why our legal framework is not able to secure a conviction in these issues with a transnational crime aspect. Even the Akasha case, we failed, but then through cooperation with the US, a conviction was obtained in the US through a plea bargain, which means there was a guilt on the part of the players, but they were not. Nobody was able to prosecute them successfully in Kenya. So, what are your thoughts on the failure of prosecution to obtain any progress in that front?
I don't think it's a failure of the prosecution. I think it's more a case of corruption and simply lack of political will. The law is there. We have too many laws in Kenya, honestly. Too many. So I tend to think that it's more of corruption, so that these cases never see the light of day, or they take forever in court with the never-ending applications that are not making sense. Then there is the aspect also, this one we can't ignore, the level of investigation that happens. Do we gather sufficient evidence to make sure that the case is watertight? Yeah, that is a challenge. So to me, honestly, those are the three primary issues that I would say are our greatest hindrance. That when you listen like to the Sani Abacha case, not Sani Abacha, the Akasha cases, they took forever, round and round and round, back and forth, application after application, nothing happening. Okay. So for me, lack of political will, corruption, and not having watertight evidence to proceed to prosecution. That to me, I believe, is our challenge. And when you talk about transnational crimes and recovering, there's a very interesting case to read in the UK jurisprudence, the Sani Abacha case, where the government of Nigeria went to the UK and said, look, this money is in your jurisdiction. This money was acquired by corruption. We want it back. Case did take some time, but eventually it was completed, and the money was to be returned back to Nigeria. So that was a successful case of corruption committed in one country, the funds laundered and hidden in another jurisdiction, but eventually were repatriated back to the country of origin. It's actually, if you just Google under Bailey, the British and Irish legal, you'll see the case of Sani Abacha. And it effectively discusses, what happened and how the court finally said, we hold that the money should go back to Nigeria. So to me, those are our problems. Why did it have to intervene for the US to intervene and say, enough is enough. We are taking these chaps to America. They're going to be tried there. Huku kwenyu tumekataa. Atuusongi. Right? Don't we have instances where evidence disappears? I don't know what happens. Chain of custody is broken. So that brings evidentiary issues in court again, because we cannot fully authenticate the chain of custody. You know, that is, how was the evidence acquired? How was it stored all this time, etc.? Who has come in contact with it? All those are elements in the chain of custody, so as to show that the evidence has not been tampered with. So just tamper with how evidence has been handled, and you break the chain of custody, and you create doubt. That case will fail when it goes to court. So those are some of the challenges. That's why I'm saying that the evidence we have is not watertight in terms of how we are going to prove it, or the kind of evidence that we have. So that is my comment on that issue.
So on another note, you're saying in other countries they have the mafia, but in Kenya the mafia has a country.
Look at no, we hatujafika hapo. No, hatujafika hapo. You cannot compare us to what is that country for Colombia? You can't compare us to Colombia in some of those places. Huko ni kulikuwa kubaya zaidi.
It was an lighter note.
So, can we say there are loopholes in the regulation process? Some yes, and one of the greatest loopholes that has always been there is the lack of coordination, that the entities that should be working together are trying to outdo each other. So instead of working collaboratively, they have task forces, yes, but instead of working together, they're trying to outdo each other, to tick their KPIs, so that when we look at their performance contracting, they be seen to be doing more than the other agency, instead of realizing, look, in this fight, can we get together and work towards eliminating these crimes? Then we will both have won. We can even agree how to share those scorecards, so that it can be seen that we both achieved. But it's a case of each fighting the other. So yes, in a way, it is a case of loopholes in the regulation process. Any other?
Yes, Mwalimu, can I ask on the penalties? Where there is the section says that in the case of a fine, one would be required to pay up to 5 times the but then there is a limit that one amount not exceeding 5 million. You know, is that not double speak?
It is double speak. You give with one hand, then you very quickly take away with the other. Because definitely the 5 times more, actually the statement should be in some of those kind of legislation. It states this whichever is higher. Usually that's what happens, so that you pay the higher amount. Because maybe what if we are talking 5 times of 200 million? Honestly, why shouldn't you pay that? So yes, you give with one hand and you take with the other. Bosco?
Okay, good evening, Mwalimu.
Good evening.
If you allow me, maybe I play the devil's advocate on this. There is so much field that is talked about corruption, and yes, we know there is a lot of negative effects is as a result. However, in some situations, sometimes you are at a loss whether really to support or to condemn corruption. For instance, in failed states, maybe like what Sudan was and Somalia back then, they still had laws, which were being broken left, right, and center. And sometimes to get services, being corrupt would seem like the only way. Could there be some room whereby
To
corruption
justify that.
would be justified?
But look at it this way, Bosco. Why are you paying for a service that you're entitled to as a citizen? You're taxed. So you're rightfully actually entitled to that service. You've already paid for it through your taxes. So why should you pay again for the same service? Why should you?
Well, I was saying in some of these countries whereby, for instance, in what is happening in Israel, this warring country right now, Israel, Palestine, we have so many of them, and you may actually come to the realization that you may not actually get some services because of how difficult, and sometimes the services you want could be life-saving. Just the other day, we had the issue of corona. And one of the commodities that was very difficult to get was these oxygen tanks. So in the bid to save lives, although it will fall under ethics in some way, could there be a soft spot for corruption? And in this sense, I mean, we are in a law class whereby you can try to defend yourself using such in a court of law, defending a corrupt practice so as to save lives, for instance.
Corruption is one of those things that's hard to justify, because who says that you're the more entitled to get that service, to get that oxygen than somebody else? What makes you more entitled to get it than the other person who is also suffering? It's difficult.
In a hypothetical situation whereby these commodities are like the other day we were discussing about the issue of Israel and Palestine, and one of the modes of war being curtailing food, starving people.
Yes.
So you found a way of corrupting, say, the soldiers or whoever is manning security, so that you may get either foodstuff or medical aid to people.
But that is wrong. You know why? Under the law of war, you should not deny medical aid, because especially medical aid that involves civilians. If you're denying it to the combatants, yes. But anything to do with civilians are protected by the law of war. So why should you pay so as to access aid? Yet the law is clear. These people should not be in any way suffer unnecessarily in a situation of war. That's why they should never be targeted. That's why you don't even target installations like hospitals, because those are supposed to help the civilian population. So it may, on the face of it, it may appear as a good thing that the bribery in that case, or the corruption, is a good thing. But at the core of it, if you think about it, it's not. Because in the first place, isn't that using it, as you're saying, as a means to using it, you're using the denial of food and medical services as a means of war, which is prohibited when you're dealing with civilians. So it is wrong in the first place. I don't know whether it's making sense. In terms of, I hear what you're trying to say, that on the face of it, it may appear like it's a good thing that the corruption is helping. But what is at the core of it, at its heart? Is it really a good thing? I mean, they should even not be discussing aid that is going to civilians, should be passing those borders. So long as it's aid for civilians, it should be allowed to move.
Thank you, Mwalimu. I stand good. I actually get your point that it is one of the crimes that is very difficult to defend, while at the same time there can be that false illusion that there could be some justification, but it remains to be wrong by all counts.
It is. It's anyway. Yeah, makes me remind myself maybe I should go back to the law of war to teach it once again. For those of you who don't know the law of war, the humanitarian law is the law of war. There is actually law in place. Oh gosh, this world that tells you how you're supposed to, the do's and don'ts in the battlefield when you're fighting. Any other question? Yes, the law of armed conflicts. Now, mine is to say, in conclusion, thank you very much. You have actually been a very interesting group to have. Thank you for the preparations that you are making for the presentations, made the class more interesting, the participation itself also. As I say, even if I was to come to class and talk to myself, that would be most boring. But that you participated, that made the class more interesting. The questions, the comments, everything made it more interesting. And in actual fact, in this course, you find some areas where while people are fighting to be relevant at the domestic level, we have been discussing areas where you can branch into and make yourself relevant at an international level. And also even domestically, by the way, because, for example, let's just take matters to do with cybercrime law. How many lawyers are well-versed in matters cybercrime? Yet that's where we are headed. That is, honestly, that is where we are going. Yes. The transnational element of the way crimes are being committed means we should be prepared. As a lawyer, you should be able to articulate your case, even if it has transnational elements. We are now, law firms are uniting with others across the border to make it easier to deal with matters. So such a course gives you the understanding to be able to see the broader aspects of even what you may have thought is just a local offense, for you to be able to see the broader reach. And as I keep telling, those that come across me in the law class, think outside the box. Please don't think that law means the only other way is you must go to Kenya School of Law, get admitted, join a law firm here, and that is it. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. That's very okay. But remember, on the other hand, we are saying there are not enough law firms, it's crowded, etc. Okay? Yes, AI, deepfakes, all that. Why not cover niche for yourself? You've done a course like this. We are talking about this whole issue now of digital currencies, etc. Soon, our courts will have to handle this kind of cases. Are they ready? You heard of the two groundbreaking cases. Actually, they were done by, both of them, the representation was by a former student of ours. I can't remember her name. These ones that involved Google, it was Meta. Let's just say they involved Meta, the parent company of Google, Twitter, is it Instagram, right? And the working conditions of these people who are supposed to filter content, right? I mean, that's a case that involved a company that is established in another jurisdiction, has come to Kenya. Why? The jurisdiction, the laws for it to operate in its home jurisdiction are too tight. So look for somewhere where it is not, you do not have such strict guidelines to abide by and which you can maybe flaunt. Kenya, here we come. You come, you cause harm, and you want to say, actually, you don't even have jurisdiction to try us. We don't belong here, right? Interesting case. But these are the kind of scenarios that we are going to find ourselves facing. So such a course opens you up to be ready to see and deal with these kind of offenses. The one thing I'll tell you for sure, if you ever intend to practice law, or if you're not sure, please just finish with the law school first. Yes, Mercy Mutemi, thank you. Yes, Mercy. Yeah. Finish with law school, please. For one, I can already assure you, they're going to change the syllabus soon and very soon. The law school syllabus will change. We don't know to what as of now. So, Sasgine, you're better off. Kama, if you intend to practice, and if you're not sure whether you will ever practice, just finish. Wachana nayo. Weka certificate hapo. Right? But you have been admitted, your chapter umemaliza. Then also, now think outside the box, how you're going to apply your law. There's so many ways, because law affects almost every part of our lives. So there are different ways that you can apply it. Those are the words that I will leave you with. I wish you all the best for the exam. What I can tell you for the examination, it is application. There is no state explain etc. They are all problem questions that will require you to read the facts and apply the knowledge. So I wish you all the best. Tutakutana humo kwa corridor tu. So asanteni na muwe na usiku mwema.
Thank you, mwalimu. Nice day.
Asanteni.
Thank you so much.